Hello, everyone. We've got 1 minute to go. So some of you are early. Yay, that's wonderful. Um, we're going to give it just the 1 minute until 1 o'clock while you all start coming in, and then we will get started. You can go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat with your name and your organization and your land acknowledgement, since we're all coming from Lord knows where, all over the place. Um, and we're so glad you're here. I realize this was short notice, but we're trying to get this all happening as fast as we possibly can. Um, all right, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to reward those of you who are here on time, and we're going to get moving. I think we all know each other fairly well at this point. We've been through a lot together. But I'm Terry Ball. I'm the Senior Programs Manager for Californians for the Arts, heading up the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund team here. And as I just said, go ahead and come in and please introduce yourself in the chat, including your organization and your land acknowledgement. Let's take a deep breath and speak clearly. The event is being recorded. You will get later this afternoon, because Amanda is fabulous. You'll get a link to the recording. You will also get the slide deck. Martha's going to put a link in the chat with all kinds of the links. So I'm hoping what you can do right now is just take a deep breath and listen. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Which I'm one behind, so that's saying all the stuff that we just did. But I want to try to make it as easy as possible for everyone to just be able to take in the information. I realize this process involves a lot of dense information. All right, let's go to the next. Martha has just probably shared in the chat the link. What I tried to do is put all of the various links we might share that you might need for this into a single document. So you're not having to play cut and paste throughout. You can just download that one document and it's got all of the assets there. Next. So the webinar is being recorded. As I said, you'll get the deck. Questions are welcome at any time. Please use them in the Q&A function and not in the chat. What we're going to do is, this is a pretty short deck. And so I'm going to go over the payroll expense sheets that you need to fill out that you all remember from last time. We've updated them a little, hopefully making them a little more user-friendly. We're going to go over the documentation for the expenses that you have to provide. And then I want to go over all of your questions. So instead of answering in the Q&A as we go, put your questions in there, and then we'll go over them all at the end so we can all get the same information. Next. This information is also in the chat. CFT always likes to share some tips for using Zoom. So this is how you turn on your closed captioning. Next. And this is remembering that you can adjust your own view for whatever works best for you. You don't have to, what you do to your screen doesn't impact everyone else. So set things up how works best for you. Next. Okay. Before we dive in, I want to say once again, as we did in the original, advocacy works, and it's only because of the hard work and phone calls and showing up and persevering that you all did, that we are still here and this money is still here. It would never have happened in the first place without all of the grassroots advocacy. We wouldn't have fought back last year when Governor Newsom tried to pull it back, and we wouldn't have fought back this year when Governor Newsom tried to pull it back without all of you. And this is also an opportunity to say we're not done fighting, because we don't have nearly enough money. As we knew from the very beginning, we originally asked for $50 million for this program, and we have 11.5. And so there is a whole lot of your colleagues who unfortunately have not made it this far. And so the fight continues and will begin again. And we hope you will all be part of our efforts to get this fund replenished so we can help all of the other organizations, excuse me, who so desperately need these monies. All right, next. Okay, so as we all know what the program is at this point, I don't think that I need to read this to you again, but I did want to remind everybody that the program is administered by the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. This is not a program that Californians for the Arts, these are not dollars coming from Californians for the Arts. We are just here to manage the process. The state of California is the official funder. These are taxpayer dollars. And we are here managing the process, but Cal OSBA is the final authority on everything. Okay, next. Deadlines, and this is very important. We will open the portal really later this afternoon so you can begin the process. The deadline is August 15th at 11:59. We cannot allow any extensions. The state has flatly said this is it. And it's very important that we do this because we want to get this money turned around. And the sooner that we get all this information in, the sooner we can get it reviewed and we can get the state moving towards getting actual checks out the door. The order in which the new data is submitted doesn't matter. You do not have to feel like you have to get in there the moment that we open this. As long as your stuff is in before August 15th, that is fine. The order of the applications will stay in the same order as when they were originally submitted, as long as you meet the deadline. If you do not meet the deadline, what will happen is it's not that your grant will be kicked out entirely. You just won't have Q1 and Q2 of 2025 processed with your application. The application will then be processed and the grant amount will be based only on Q3 and Q4 of 2024 that you already submitted. Okay. Also, I realize that for everyone, the Go Smart portal probably gives you some twitches at this point. This process should be much smoother. Number one, we don't have 300 people all logging in at the same moment to start the applications because you can log in at any time. And obviously a great deal less information is being submitted at this point. So I do not anticipate the same types of problems that we all experienced the morning of March 10th. The other very, very important thing to remind you all is that it is great that you have made it this far. This does not guarantee funding. Number one, Cal OSBA has the final approval and they still have to do the final approvals. But what is also true is one of the challenges with this grant is because we have so much less funds than we actually need. We have to figure out as we go how many applications we can actually fund. And that is impacted by the information we're still collecting. We have the estimates based on the information, the payroll you've already submitted that we've already reviewed, and we have your projections. But the final actual grant amount, we won't know until we get through the information that you're about to submit. So what we have done is we've taken everything we've reviewed so far, and we've determined how far we believe the funds will go. And there's a large number of organizations that we've contacted to say, unfortunately, we believe, based on everything that's been reviewed so far, that by the time we get to your application, we won't have funds left. My hope is that the group that received the information to submit, that we will be able to cover most of those, but we will probably not be able to cover all of them. It's all a game of numbers. And as we all know, the information you submitted with your application for 2025, your new amounts cannot exceed that. But we don't know how far we'll be able to go because we certainly anticipate that some people will have had lower expenses than they originally projected. So that is the giant disclaimer. I don't want anyone popping champagne yet. I know this has been a painful process, and I don't want to add any more pain to that. The other reminder is to put all of your questions in the chat, and we'll go over all of that. Okay, next. All right, so in order to do this process, what you're going to do is you're going to log back into the portal, into your same account. If you have any, we know there's been a lot of turnover. So if you don't still have your login information, email us and we can get that to you. So you're going to log in. If you need to change I'm sorry, suddenly things are popping up on my screen. If you need to change your primary contact, if whoever was the old primary contact is no longer with your organization, you need to change that. You can edit your profile and do that. There's a place in the application where you can add additional contact. There's going to be a 2025 payroll submission application, and that's what you want to start. And then, as I just said, as long as you submit by August 15th at 11:59, that is the submission deadline. You must submit by then. Please don't wait until August 15th at 11 o'clock to start the process. If you're going to have trouble, we want you to find out that you're having trouble, not on Friday night at midnight. Next. Okay. We know it's been a long time since this process started. And so if there has been a change specifically to your authorized signer, there will be a place in the application for you to update that. And just as a reminder, your authorized signer must be an officer listed on the statement of information, not just somebody who your board has authorized to sign things on your behalf. In the state's eyes, the authorized signer is one of the officers listed on your statement of information that is on file with the Secretary of State. No one else is acceptable. So make sure you double check that. So if you have had a change in that since your original submission, then there will be a question there where you can update those people. If you do update the authorized signer, then you also will need to upload a revised copy of or the most recent copy of your statement of information. Okay, you don't have to update this, just if your authorized signer, maybe was your board president, you've had a change in board since March. Next. So this is the meat of where we're going. So the first questions that you will be asked is about your expenses. You're going to fill out the expense sheet like you did last time. Remember that amounts submitted cannot exceed the amount submitted in your original application. If you have actual expenses that exceed the projections, you can adjust that in whatever way is possible. Whatever way is easiest for you. If that means leaving off one employee so that you don't go over. If it means on that last employee, maybe you're $500 over the old, so you'd only submit for reimbursement for less on that way. It's okay to have changed your projections internally. The total can't change, but maybe you thought you were going to have more workers' comp expenses and you ended up with more payroll expenses, or you ended up with payroll expenses, so therefore you don't want to submit your workers' comp expenses. The internals can change. The only thing that can't change is your total amount for Q1 and Q2 cannot exceed the amounts you put in your application. Just as a reminder, up to $10,000 per employee can be reimbursed per quarter. And only W-2 employee expenses are eligible for reimbursement. No independent contractor expenses can be included in your payroll expenses. Next. Okay, so we have Excel sheets and we have number sheets. There is a Q1 sheet in either of those formats that you can download. Those links are in the document. If there's any problem with the access, we'll certainly straighten that out after the webinar. We have put these on a public drive, but sometimes access is still. It's important to remember, though, you're downloading them. Do not try to fill them out on the drive. You're going to go to because that you definitely will not have permission or access to be able to do. You're going to go, you're going to download it, you're going to save it to your computer, then open it and complete the form, whether it's in Excel or numbers, whichever works for you. And then you're going to save the final document, and that's what you will upload. You will not be able to fill them out on the drive from where you've downloaded them here. The other thing is, if you do this on Mac in numbers, the GoSmart portal does not recognize numbers. But what you can do is complete it in numbers, if that's what you have, and then at the end, just export it to Excel. Don't export it to a PDF. Please export it to Excel, because that allows us to sort if we need to and that kind of thing. Also, I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there. The other thing that's important to know is you must use these spreadsheets. Don't make up your own spreadsheet. There's a formula in there that's calculating, and so you need to use these spreadsheets. You can copy and paste into them for the different categories. All right, next. And really, we've talked about this, but it's extremely important. As I say, you will not, don't just go to the link and start trying to filling in your numbers, because that you absolutely won't have access to be able to do. When you label your sheets to upload them, please put your organization name, the quarter, and if you have multiple pages, the page number. The sheets this time allow for up to 100 entries instead of 30. So hopefully that will cover most organizations. I know from last time, probably some of you will end up having to do a second sheet. So just it's really helpful for us if you name them clearly. Next. So this is the pretty spreadsheet that you recall from last time. You're going to list each employee by name, then their lowest hourly wage. We'll go over these categories. Gross wages, health, retirement, pension, workers' comp expenses, payroll, then deducting the employee taxes withheld, and then the spreadsheet will total the numbers for you. Next, we'll go through this piece by piece. Okay, lowest hourly wage. For all employees, you must list a lowest hourly wage. One of the requirements of the legislation grant is that you are paying at least minimum wage. So we need to know the lowest amount you're paying people so we can verify that you are paying at least the prevailing minimum wage for your area. If this is a salaried employee, then you're going to calculate the number of hours they work so that versus the total amount, so that you can come up with what their lowest hourly wage is and enter that. If an employee is paid different hourly rates for different work that they did during the quarter, this also is fine. Just whatever the lowest rate you paid them at, enter that. Finally, an hourly wage must be included for every employee. If you don't include an hourly wage, then that person's gross wages will not be included in your reimbursement. Okay, gross wages. These are the total gross wages paid to each employee for the quarter. Only employee wages can be included here. If you're reimbursing people for gas, if you're reimbursing people for cell phone, those are not considered wages. It's just the amount that's actually taxable. that is allowed as a gross wage. Once again, no independent contractor uh, uh, wages can be included here, only wages for W-2 employees. Next. Okay, so the next column is expenses for health, retirement, or pension employer expenses. So these are the benefits that you do potentially for your employer, for your employees, the expenses that you have, contributions you make. If deductions are made from your employees towards, say, CalSavers or towards paying for health insurance, what is deducted from their checks is not reimbursable. It's the expenses you have as the employer that are reimbursable. Also, and this is one that confused a lot of people the first time, taxes that you pay, like Medicare and Social Security, that is not a health plan or retirement expense for you as the employer. Those are taxes and those are not reimbursable. So do not go onto your payroll reports and see what you're paying in Medicare or what you're paying for Social Security and enter that as a health, retirement, pension expense. This is if you have like a Blue Shield plan for all your employees. What you want to enter here is the amount you pay per quarter per employee. Next. Workers' compensation. Same thing here. The expenses that you pay for workers' compensation for each of your employees. And I know this is a complicated one to calculate in some cases. You can take the full premium that you pay for the year, divide that by the quarter, divide it by the number of employees. If your premium is broken down by quarter, you can take the premium for the particular quarter, divide that by the employees. You also, for some people from your workers' comp, you get the per employee rate. So usually administration people are charged a certain rate and technical people are charged a certain rate, performers. So if you know the per employee rate, you can calculate that. That's what some people did last time. One thing, when you get to the next step and you're doing the documentation, one of the first questions is, how did you calculate these expenses? And you'll have to complete that question. Next. Payroll processing expenses is the last one of the expenses that you can include. This is what you're paying to your payroll service, your paymaster. If you use an internal system like Gusto or QuickBooks, these are the expenses you have, again, broken down by employee for the quarter. Next. The final column is the tax withholding. This is another one that caused a fair amount of confusion. This is both state and federal tax withholding for your employees. The total amount that is withheld from them, it is not the portion that you as the employer pay. It is the amount that is withheld from their gross wages, including all of these various taxes that are listed here. Next. Okay, now we're going to move to the documentation. First, you're going to tell us the amounts, and then you're going to do the due diligence to help the state know that they're doing their due diligence and provide documentation that these amounts are all accurate and verifiable. For all of this documentation, these should be PDFs. Wherever possible, you know, if you've got 5 different pages that you're going to provide about workers' comp for Q1, if you can put them into one PDF, that makes everybody's life easier. If you can't, then there will be opportunities to upload multiple documents. But you can do PDFs. They can be up to 10 megabytes. And again, label them, you know, so we understand what they are. And then, as I mentioned, you will have an opportunity where you must provide how you calculated the amounts. Next. So the first thing you're going to document is that gross wages and tax withholding. Though these are entered separately, you're going to provide one documentation. The best way to do this is to get the quarterly payroll report, quarterly payroll register, whether it's from your payroll service, your paymaster, your internal system. You want a printout that shows, here's the gross wages I paid this employee for the quarter. Here's their federal tax withholding. Here's their state tax withholding, broken down in that way. That's the easiest. Different payroll services, different paymasters call these things slightly different things, but that's the information you want. In some cases, particularly with paymasters, they won't give you a total for the quarter. You may have to do the individual payroll reports, which that will work. It's obviously not as handy for any of us as if they can give you a total for the quarter. You don't want the whole year. You don't want both quarters. You want a report for the quarter that shows those breakdowns. The state tax reporting that you do and also the federal tax reporting doesn't actually give us everything we need. The state tax reporting, your DE9, E and C, those list your employee wages, but they only list state taxes. And the federal, where your federal state taxes are listed, in most cases, those are only presented in aggregate. So that federal, the 940 reports don't really help either. So it's really out of your QuickBooks, out of your Gusto, out of your payroll service or your paymaster. That's what you want here. Next. Okay, so now we're coming to those health, retirement, pension, employer expenses. And what you want to do here is you want documentation of what you paid. So it could be a bill for the quarter. In most cases, these are going to be monthly bills, but you want to provide documentation that backs up the amounts that you included. So if in the total that you had, because you happen to do both health and retirement, then you're going to want bills from both of those. And importantly, the first question is going to let you explain so we know what we're looking at. You know, we have both health and retirement. We have health for some people, and here's how we calculated, and here's what we've provided in terms of documentation. Again, the reminder, Medicare and Social Security are taxes. They are not employer paid expenses. Next, workers' comp. This, again, you're going to want to provide, we do not need your workers' comp policy. We need a premium. And you want to make sure that the invoices you provide cover the time period that you are submitting expenses for. We had some people last time mismatching. So you don't want, you want to make sure that the documentation you're providing backs up the expenses you're providing. And again, you're going to want to be able to explain how you did your calculations. Next. They're going to do the exact same thing for your payroll processing. This might be a bill, you know, your invoices from paychecks, could be invoices from your paymaster, could be your Gusto bills for the quarter. And once again, you're going to show in your calculations how you came up with the number that you have entered next under each employee. Next. Okay, then you're going to rinse and repeat. So you're going to do each of those steps for the Q1 of 2025, and then you're going to go back and you're going to do your payroll expense sheet for Q2, and then your documentation for Q2. Do not combine your Q1 and Q2 documentations or calculations. We want it to be very easy and clear to make the case that here's what you spent, and here's your documentation that you spent it. We want to make this very easy for the state to see and decipher and understand your calculations, so everyone gets a gold star. Next. Once again, that very important deadline is there. We have been told we cannot grant any extensions. So get your stuff in by August 15th so we can get this all processed and moving forward. If you have any questions, please email me, terry@caforthearts.org. We've also given the login portal there. Next. Okay, Q&A. So let me open up the Q&A and see what we've got going here. Hi, Nikki. Um, when we submit this additional info, will it affect our place in line? No, as long it will not affect your place in line. Those places are cast in stone at this point. And we're not even like moving people back in line if they miss this deadline. What we're saying is if you miss the deadline, we're moving forward with the information we have here, and we will only process Q3 and Q4 for you for reimbursement. I've had a couple of people ask if they can opt to not submit. You absolutely can. If you don't want, for some reason, to submit your expenses for Q1 and Q2, and you want to say, just take what we have, you can absolutely do that. Understand, we will only process Q3 and Q4 because what we have from you so far for Q1 and Q2 does not include the documentation. So, if maybe your thing's canceled and you didn't actually go forward and you don't have the expenses for Q1 and Q2, you do not have to submit, but then those numbers won't be. It looks like everybody's having trouble with the links. I apologize. I will sort that out as soon as the webinar is over, and we'll send a mass email to everybody with the corrected links. Sometimes our Google Drive hates people.
So Carrie, I pasted all the links individually in the chat. So if you save the chat at the end, you'll have them immediately. And then maybe we can send it out with a copy of a recording of the webinar when we send that out.
Okay, not a problem. And like I say, I know some people in trying to download it have had trouble if they try to edit it there. But we will get everybody's links sorted out. But right now I want to move on with the substantive. Because yeah, you absolutely shouldn't have to have a Gmail account. Is maximum funding for the last 2 quarters based on the totals of these 2 quarters, or are we evaluated against our quarterly estimates? Due to a payroll anomaly, our March payroll went. What it is they are looked at on their own, but the totals cannot exceed the total projections that you submitted before. The projection for the grant and the grant amount and our belief at this point of how far is based on those original projections. So if you projected, I'm going to have $50,000 in total expenses in Q1 and $50,000 in total expenses in Q2, and you ended up with 25,000 in Q1 and 75,000 in Q2, that's fine. If you ended up with 75 in both of them, then you're only going to be able to submit 50,000 for each. Hopefully that makes sense. We're using info generated by QuickBooks. If those, number one, in terms of using the QuickBooks information, and I'm assuming everyone can see the questions, so I don't necessarily need to read the questions. So there are 2 ways that the information could be coming out of QuickBooks. If you process payroll through QuickBooks, then that's fine. And that should give you a report. And if it doesn't total those taxes, but it breaks them down individually for each employee, so we can get to the total, that also is fine. If you are entering some other payroll information into QuickBooks, and so it's just in your journal reporting, then what we need is a report from the actual payroll service. But if your taxes are broken down as individual categories and your report doesn't total them into one, that's fine, as long as the math is there so that we can add up the total that you ultimately enter. What we need to know is that all of the money that was taken out of those gross wages and paid to either the state or the federal is taken out of your reimbursement. So the spreadsheet deletes the total tax withholding. In terms of the numbers in line, right now we cannot release those. We are working with the state to try to be able to release some preliminary information about the demographics, and one of those things would be people's place in line. But right now we cannot tell you that. The actual amounts exceed the earlier amounts. Should we cut them back or should we submit the actuals and you will cut it back? Ultimately, if you don't cut it back, we will, but it is fine if you do. And so if you end up, presenting a payroll report and your numbers on your payroll report are higher than what are in your expense sheet, that's totally fine. But we will cap it at the other, either way. Is it possible? The Excel spreadsheet adds the employee paid taxes to the totals. It is not, it should not be. It should be deleting. So Abby, if the spreadsheet is doing that, send me an email separately because no, the formula should be deleting the employee paid taxes column, not adding it. How do we check who is the authorized signer from the Secretary of State? We can send you an email separate, Sarah, but you can go onto the authorized signer is not set by the Secretary of State. When you completed your original application, which you can find in your portal, you designated somebody in your organization as the authorized signer. That authorized signer that you designated has to be someone that is listed with the Secretary of State on your statement of information. And you can look that up on the Secretary of State website. You can find your statement of information there. And if you don't know how to do that, send us an email and we can send you instructions. Will it be all or nothing, or will you adjust down to include more applicants? Unfortunately, Stephen, we cannot make adjustments to the legislation prescription because this program, this funding, is based on legislation. This is not like a grant program that is done by your local foundation or even the Arts Council, where they have the leeway to look at the guidelines and make changes. This program was established by a piece of legislation, and it very specifically prescribes a lot of the details about the application process, the eligibility, and it specifically outlines the size of the grants and how those grants are calculated. So even though we are very underfunded and oversubscribed, we did not have the option to go back and say, okay, we're going to change the formula and give everyone less. We have to go with the formula that was included in the original legislation. The only way to change things at this point would be to go back and pass new legislation. Okay, our previous authorized signer. As long as that authorized signer is still, Kathy, this is your question. As long as the authorized signer is still included on your current statement of information as an officer, then you're fine. If there are other things on the statement of information, there's a person that's the agent for service. There's the filer of the statement of information. Those don't count. What this needs to be is you need to go to your statement of information and you need to look at the officers that are listed and make sure that whoever you have listed as an authorized signer, which is the person that at the end of the day is going to sign your grant agreement, that's the person, the official person. They have to be listed on that statement of information as an officer of your organization. And Kara, we've already we answered that question about going over. There's not a problem with not listing things. You know, if you've already maxed out the amount, then you don't need to list additional employees. If you think you're going to go over and you want to say, okay, I'm just going to list the gross wages and I'm not going to worry with the other expenses because then I don't have to worry about that documentation, you can do that also. The standard naming convention, yes, Marilyn, thank you for that question. We would love it if you named them with your organization name or some abbreviation thereof, the quarter that they apply to, the thing that they are, you know, workers' comp, et cetera, and then the page number. If you're going to do 5 pages of workers' comp stuff and you can't combine those into one, then the page number there. Can you repeat what cannot change? Yeah, what can't change, Alessandra, and I am sorry if I'm butchering names, is the total amount that was submitted for Q1 and Q2. If Q1 is over and Q2 is under, that's fine. It's the total for the two that you cannot exceed. No, you don't have to put payroll expense sheet in the name of the document, and you could just say expense sheet. However, if employees have changed, but the role in the no, Audrey, you can just list the names. We were not because we know when you submitted the projections, there were some people because they were cast members and stuff that even just put in the role. For right now, what you want to do when you fill out that expense sheet is you want to list the name of the employee and the information and anything you can do to have that most closely match the payroll documentation you're providing. In other words, if your payroll documentation is in alphabetical order, please do your payroll expense sheet in alphabetical order. If your payroll documentation is by department or something, and you list 5 people and then it jumps, then if you can match that, we have to take each sheet of documentation that you provide and match it to that expense sheet. And so anything and everything you can do to streamline that process for us makes the whole thing move faster. Will expenses be disallowed if their lowest hourly wage is under minimum wage? Not only will they be disallowed, but your entire grant. And it is one of the things that you attest to apply for the grant is that you are in compliance with minimum wage laws. So if you are if you are paying any employees less than minimum wage, then you are not in compliance with minimum wage laws and your entire grant is ineligible. So it's very important that you fill that out. And it's very important that you be in compliance, because one of the things that your authorized signer signs off on and that you will have to sign off on to receive the money is that you are in compliance with those labor laws, that you are correctly classifying employees versus independent contractors, that you're complying with minimum wage and other protections for employees. Help, how to calculate workers' comp and payroll process. We have bills that are not broken down by employee. That's totally fine, Abby. Most people have bills that are not broken down by employee. So the easiest thing to do, let's take payroll processing first. Your payroll processing is probably a monthly bill or a per payroll bill. So you're going to add up all of the bills for the quarter, and you're going to divide by the number of employees that you paid during that quarter and enter that amount in each line. And you're going to explain, this is what I did in that question that says, how did you do your calculations? Workers' comp, for some people, you get a premium for the year that says your workers' comp from September 1st of this year through August 30th of next year is $10,000. So if that's the case, then you could take that total, divide it by 4 to reflect the 4 different quarters, and then take the quarter that you're looking at, divide it by employees, and put it in, that amount into each category. The same is true. Some other people, you pay your premium specifically per quarter. Then you're going to take the quarter that matches that you're submitting for and do that same breakdown. The other thing that you can do for some people, you get an actual rate. Everybody has a rate, you just don't always know it. But you also on your bill, it may say, not Susie is $1.57 per $100, but admin, clerical employees are $1.57. And then you can do those calculations. For most people, the easiest thing and what most people did was take the premium for the quarter and or for the year and do the math. But just again, tell us a story. This is like any other grant application in that you want to make it as easy for the reviewers as possible to understand what you've provided. We have to prove to the state that the numbers you provided are real. And whatever you do to make that story clear and legible and understandable makes life easier for everyone. What about paying people for paid travel time? As long as you are paying them a wage. So in other words, you're not reimbursing them $50 for their gas. It took me an hour to drive to where I do my work, and I got paid for that hour. Those are wages. If you're taking taxes out of them, then that's a gross wage. You can pay them for their time. You can't pay them for the reimbursement for their gas because that is not a taxable wage. Frame the argument. Yes, if the wages for an employee already exceed $10,000, there is no reason to also include their other expenses because you're not going to get reimbursed for it anyway, and you're only creating documentation for yourself. So yes, it's totally fine. If somebody makes $15,000 for the quarter, you can just put that $15,000, it'll be capped at $10,000, and you don't have to include their other expenses. Okay, Lisa, we just need to know what your question was from gross wages, and you'll get the slides. But I need to know what the question is. Payroll company Square does not break it down by employee. Can we make the total? Yes, absolutely, Abby. You can take the total. I didn't even realize Square did payroll. Can we be reimbursed for the cost of sexual harassment training? No, that interestingly is not one of the expenses. You are required to have the sexual harassment training, but that is not a payroll expense that is listed in the legislation. That's an interesting question, though, for the future. Is there a separate document with with questions for documentation? In terms of submitting it, there will be a question. Each separate area of documentation will have you'll be asked, do you have documentation related to X? And if you say yes, then it will ask you first, how did you calculate your health expenses, for example? And then it will give you an opportunity to upload. And then it will say, do you have another page to upload? And if so, then there will be a place to upload. Yes, Martha.
So just going back to the question about the harassment training, for most people, I think the harassment training is an hour and it would just show up as one of the hours that was paid. There isn't a place for them to subtract that out, and it won't match their payroll.
No, I think the question was the actual expense for sexual harassment. So if your question is, if you paid people to take sexual harassment, yes, that's employee wages. That's totally fine. If you paid a company like Gusto for them to give sexual harassment training to your employees, then that is not an expense. Does those withheld taxes have to be broken down by federal, state, or a column? No. If you've got a column on your thing that says total employee taxes, that is totally fine. And that's less math for everyone. If you did not request additional information in our submission for Q3 and Q4, can we assume that was sufficient? Yes, Peter. If there was a problem with your Q3 and Q4 submissions, you would have already heard from us and said, we've got an issue with this. We need additional. So whatever you provided for Q3 and Q4, do that same thing for this, and I would think you should be fine. So yes, yeah. Everybody who we have been through all of this group's Q3 and Q4 expenses already. And so any questions we had, you have already been contacted about. So whatever you did before, do again. If our actual amount exceeds our estimate, do you want us to submit expenses? And so we've been over that. You can either submit less or we will cap it out and max it. Either is fine. For the invoices, what we really need is the invoice themselves. It is good additional backup to provide proof of payment for the invoices. You do not need to provide proof of payment for all the wages. Your payroll report is fine for that. If, for example, your additional services like your workers' comp or whatever, are charged by a paymaster, then the one invoice for them is fine. Can you provide some examples of acceptable responses to the questions and how we calculate expenses? No, Brian, what we're talking about in terms of calculations is not for payroll wages. What we're talking about is for on the payroll expense sheet, you're going to, for employee A, you're going to enter a total for health expenses, and you're going to enter a total for workers' comp expenses. Now, if you've got a calculation from the payroll company that says, for employee A, you spent this much in health expenses and you spent this much in workers' comp expenses, then enter that. And in terms of how you calculated, say it was reported on the invoice from my payroll company. For most people, they're going to have, for like health expenses, maybe 3 months worth of bills from Blue Shield. Pick the health insurance company of your choice. And if you're paying insurance for every one of your employees, that might be totals. You know, your invoice for this month is $10,000. Or if you only cover certain employees, the invoice may be broken down by, you know, the executive director, it was $1,000 for the month. And, you know, the 3 electricians, it was $50 for each of them. So there's some math that probably went into how you went from those invoices to the amount, because you can't say my total expenses for health insurance for the entire company was $10,000 for the quarter. You have to break them down by employee. If that doesn't make sense, Brian, email me. Bethany, if the payroll register clearly lays out a column for all employee paid taxes, state, do you also want? No. If your if your payroll register clearly lays it out like that, then you get a gold star and we love you. And that is the quickest and easiest way to process payroll. And why they don't all just do that is a question for another day. When we finished uploading our documents, does the authorized signer need to log in? No. The authorized signer does not have to be part of the login process at all. They're just, they had to sign the certificates at the beginning, the certifications. They will be involved if you get approved in processing all of that paperwork. You do not need to involve your authorized signer at this point. Our total reimbursement request cannot exceed our original estimates for Q1 is the total per quarter. It's the total of the 2 quarters combined. You can't be more than that. So we're basically submitting the documentation to support our projections that we had sent earlier this year to show what we actually did. Jen, you're replacing those projections with a new payroll expense sheet that gives your actual. So on your payroll, on your projections, you may have thought you were going to have 10 employees during Q1 that were each going to make $100. Your actual may be that you had 15 employees that each made $50. Whatever your actual was, so you're going to provide new payroll expense sheets with whatever actually happened, and then you're going to provide the documentation for those. For Q1 and Q2, you didn't provide documentation before, you only did your projections. So you're going to update your projections on the expense sheet and make them actuals, and then you're going to document those. Yes, you will receive a link to the recording by email, Angelica. If we're lucky enough to receive award, what future documentation will be required from the state to show funds were spent? Must we demonstrate? Yes. The documentation, the state has the right to come back and verify how you spent the money, but that would be the same documentation. Because this is a reimbursement, you're already documenting this is how you spent the money. So you don't have to do that level of gymnastics. You just have to be able to prove that this is what you received in finances and these are the expenses that those paid for, if that makes sense. What happens if your actuals are less than your projections? Then there's extra money for other people to potentially get funded. You will be funded based on your actuals. So unless they are more than your projections. So if you projected you were going to have $10,000 in expenses in Q1 and you only had 5,000, then the reimbursement will be calculated on the 5,000. So you could potentially receive less than you projected. You cannot receive more than you projected. For receipt of grant, how does the arts want to be acknowledged in our, in the first, Cal OSBA has not given us language at this point for that acknowledgement. That will be included in your grant agreement. As a guesstimate, what might be an earliest date that first organizations might receive notification of funding awarded and payment himself? Toby, I wish I could give you that guesstimate, but as the saying goes, my mama didn't raise no fool. It will not be before sometime in September in terms of announcements going out. What they have said all along is it will be from the time, this I can tell you, from the time that you receive the grant agreement to sign and you return it, it will be at least 45 days from that point for the actual check to be processed. You're very cute, Steve, because I'm very lucky to have a very awesome team around me. And I forgot, because I have no manners, to introduce the fabulous Amanda Sanchez and Martha Dimson from our team who are with us here today. Our other goddesses of PAEPF, Beatrice Casagran is off having an eye appointment, so she is not able to be here with us. And Sophie Lynn and Allison McSwain are working other ways today. They're both working artists and they're off being lighting designers. But thank you. We appreciate the positive. And I do have a fabulous team around me. Can we change our naming? Yes, you can change your naming convention from your previous documentation. And you know, you're not going to be disallowed because of your naming convention. Try to make it both easy for you and easy for us to know what it is we're looking at. If we spin it from Gusto, do you also need, no. If you submit a payroll report from Gusto and it has the gross wages and the taxes, and I will tell you, Gusto is one that does a great report. You do not need to provide the additional documentation. The Gusto report is fabulous. Gusto, Paychex also has really good. QuickBooks Payroll has good reports. If an error inconsisting between our report spreadsheet and documentation, what happens? Will you eliminate the relevant reimbursements the whole quarter? You will be contacted and given a very short deadline to correct. And if you don't meet the deadline, and I would assume, because everything needs to be the same for everyone, the deadlines during the first phase were 48 hours, 2 business days. So you get an email that says, hey, wait, your workers' comp invoice that you provided for us is from 2023, and these expenses were 2024. Please provide, corrected documentation. And if you don't meet the deadline, or your new documentation doesn't correct the problem, then your whole thing isn't thrown out. We just eliminate that particular expense. You mentioned that for documentation, you can submit a single combined PDF per quarter. So that would include what? So only per category. So if you've got 6 Blue Shield bills or 6 payroll, because your invoices come from your payroll company every 2 weeks when you do payroll. So you've got, someone do the math, it's not me. 12 documents from Paychex for this quarter. You can combine all of those into one PDF. So you only have one thing to upload. Do not combine your payroll, your paycheck expenses, and your workers' comp expenses and your health all into one. You can combine them within a particular category and within a particular quarter. So we don't want all of your workers' comp from Q1 and Q2 in one document. We want to be able to look at your payroll expense sheet in one hand and look at your workers' comp documentation in the other and say, look, here they told me how they calculated it, and their math adds up exactly to what they put on the expense form. At this point, your reviewer stands up and sings with joy. I did the workers the hard way, by employee, by category. Is it okay to use the easier version? Yes, it is absolutely. You do not have to use the same calculations for Q1 and Q2 that you used for Q3 and Q4. Katrina, in terms of incentives and commissions, if taxes are taken out of them, because different people do these things, different companies calculate them different ways. If taxes are taken out of the amount, if the bonus is taxed, if those other things are taxed, then they are considered wages and you can include them. If they are post-tax, then they are not. Or pre-tax, I guess if they're pre-tax. If they're a non-taxed item, then you cannot. In the example you just gave of not including workers' comp for an employee over 10,000, could I split the aggregate workers' comp expense bills for the QA among their employees? No, because then you're going to be overcharging for that one employee. So if you have a single employee that is over $10,000, so therefore I'm not going to put in his workers' comp, but I paid $5,000 for workers' comp for all of my employees. When I divide that $5,000 by the number of employees I had in the quarter, you still have to leave that last person. So you're accurately describing how much you paid per employee because you did pay workers' comp for that higher wage employee, if that makes sense. Can you please repeat your information about how to order on the payroll sheets? You want them to match the order on the paymaster documentation. Yes. Yes. Jan, the idea is I have to look at the list of employees you have listed on your payroll expenses, and I have to verify them on your documentation from your paymaster or your payroll service. The closer those two can be in terms of order, the faster it is for me to check them and the more reviews I can get through quicker. Again, this is not the kind of thing that we're going to disallow you for. If we have to hunt and peck, we will hunt and peck. But any amount to which you can make those two documents be friends makes life easier and means we get through all of the reviews faster. Hopefully that answers. If not, shoot me an email, Jan. Kara, when you are determining how awards are given, my understanding is that you go in the order that the application was finally submitted, regardless of the system freezes. Kara, you have summed it up exactly. The order of awards is based on the timestamp for submission of the applications. Because we had multiple applications coming in per minute at times, those timestamps are down to the second. Every application we received has a timestamp of when it was submitted down to the second, and that order has been preserved throughout. So what will happen is, and we do understand there were glitches and there were problems, but from all of the sort of looking at things, what is also true is those problems impacted everyone. There was not a certain region that was impacted by more because the problems were at the server itself. Everybody was having freezes. Everybody was having slow response. Everyone was having the nightmare of trying to upload all of the documents. And everyone was shut out when they closed down the system so they could fix it. The part of the reason for closing down the entire system was so that it was fair and nobody could proceed. So no one submitted documents until a certain time after everything was back up. So yes, everything is based in that timestamp. The timestamp is the almighty in this. Is there an updated timeline for CalOC application processing and disbursement? Not really. Research, is it possible to hold portion of award as restricted income until we need it for our next fiscal year? Not really, Jen. The award you're going to get is a reimbursement, just like when you get a California Arts Council grant. It's a reimbursement for funds you already spent. So those checks will all be issued, and it is money that is coming to you to pay for those expenses you already paid. Your question about how you record that and deal with that, that's an internal question between you and your accountant. And I am not here to give accounting advice because nobody wants that. Can we get a reminder of what we set in our projections for Q1 and Q2? You should have a copy of your application. And if you don't, we can resend you a copy of your application. Is unemployment something that could be counted in taxes withheld? In most cases, if unemployment is withheld, then yes, it should be included in the tax withholding. In most cases, unemployment taxes are an employer expense. And so therefore you would not have to include them. You don't include them for reimbursement, but you also don't include them in the tax withholding. And that is one thing. A few people last time made the error of, oh, I'm sorry, and I'm over by 5 minutes. Sorry, thank you for those of you who are hanging in. The employer portion of taxes does not have to be included in that employee withholding column. If you include your employer taxes there, you're hurting yourselves. That is just the employee withholding. Something that could be counted. Will there be one organization who gets the leftovers who will receive a partial award after the bulk of the grant is spent? No, and what we will do is if there are any funds left over, we'll just continue through in order. You know, the next application will be moved up. So conceivably, could that at some point be that there's a grant, you know, we've got $100 left over, potentially the state will make that decision. But the immediate is the grants, once they are finalized now with this final information that is being submitted, then we'll start at the beginning of those that have been deemed eligible, and CalOSBA will make those final determinations of the eligibilities, and they'll keep moving through in order until money runs out. And so, yes, I'm sure at the end there will be one grant that is only partial. But we don't know at this point how far we'll get. We have estimates. You know, we know we've confirmed the Q3 and Q4 expenses and made those adjustments to the estimates, and then we have people's projections, and so and we know you know, the reviews that have gone on, but we don't actually know exactly where we're going to run out of money. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you for the thanks. Okay, so we are to the end of the questions. We are 8 minutes over. I apologize. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for hanging in with this process through all of this. I know it has been long. I know it has been hard. I know it has been arduous. But we appreciate you. We are doing everything we can to try to make this as humane a process as possible. And you all have my email. You know, you can email me anytime, and we'll get responses back. I will say to everyone, email is always better with me than a phone call. It's not that I don't like talking to you. I love talking to everyone, but I can reply to emails at any time of day and while doing other things like sitting in meetings. And then you have, you know, the actual information. If there's a resource I want to give you, if there's a link I want to give you, I can include it there. So email is always the fastest way to reach me. Okay. We are done. We are good. Good luck. I'm going to go ahead and open up the portal this afternoon. I encourage all of you, please go log in, download the documents. Let's figure out today and tomorrow any of those kinds of technical problems. So next week you can just concentrate on filling up your documents and submitting them. Thank you all. Amanda.